Hello and welcome back to the channel. In our last canal video we navigated along the canal on Chris's narrowboat Daydream, and during that we went through the village of Braunston where we briefly touched on its rich history.
However, we became curious about Braunston's part in our industrial heritage. So we've returned with a special focus on one of the most iconic landmarks on the canal network, the majestic All Saints Church in Braunston, often known as the Cathedral of the Canals. Nestled in the heart of the village, the Cathedral of the Canals stands as a testament to Braunston's rich heritage, plus its unique relationship with the waterways surrounding it.
So why not join us as we take a little closer look into that history that makes the village and its church an absolute icon of the canal network.
But before we head into the village of Braunston and visit the church, it's important to acknowledge the significance of this meeting of two waterways, the Oxford Canal and the Grand Union Canal, which have graced the village of Braunston for over 200 years. Welcome to Braunston Junction. Braunston Junction is a pivotal point in the British canal network, where the nation's industrial heritage and the history and our canals converge. Here is where two significant canals meet, the Oxford Canal and the Grand Union Canal, and their junction became crucial in shaping the development of Britain's inland waterways, and it sits on the very edge of the village. The Oxford Canal is one of England's earliest canals and was completed on the 2nd of January 1790 as the first canal boat arrived at Oxford. It connected Coventry with Oxford and subsequently south to the River Thames, giving access to London. The Oxford Canal played a vital role in the transportation of goods and reducing transit times considerably, and with it, transportation costs. Meandering through the countryside, the 78-mile-long Oxford Canal was initially designed with many twists and turns, as a contour canal as it followed the natural lines of the landscape with few locks. But some 30 years later, the Oxford was straightened and shortened by some 13 miles to improve its efficiency. Meanwhile, the Grand Junction Canal, later known as the Grand Union Canal, was established to create a more direct route between London and the Midlands. Opened in 1805, it soon became a crucial link for the transport of industrial goods, fueling the growth of the Industrial Revolution. But let us remember it was the convergence of these two canals, the Grand Union Canal and Oxford Canal here at Braunston, that created a bustling canal junction, making the village a hive of commercial activity.
Today Braunston is a charming village, but as we've seen, it's been one of rich transformation over the years. Braunston was once little more than a quaint settlement, little more than a hamlet, but Braunston saw an incredible growth with the arrival of the canals in the 19th century. Before the canals, Braunston was a small, rural agricultural village. Its economy relied heavily on farming, and life moved at a much slower pace. The village, whose name comes from Brant's Farm, or Brant Settlement, sits high on a ridgeline. But as Chris said, it was the construction of the canals that marked a turning point. A new waterway connected Braunston to major trade routes, bringing with it unprecedented opportunities for commerce and for industry. With the canals came a surge in the village's population. As the village expanded and new businesses sprang up, the local economy boomed, turning Braunston into a thriving hub of industrial activity. And the village thrived on this for over 150 years with the canal trade. During this time of village growth, many former boatmen, along with their families, developed strong links with the village of Braunston, and particularly with All Saints Church. We've all heard the story that early boatmen worked all their lives and often referred to this church as a Cathedral of the Canals, but maybe this could be little more than a romantic thought. Unfortunately, there's no real strong evidence or documentary evidence to support such a fascinating tale. Did you know that many working boatmen children were actually baptised twice? First, they would be baptised at a church close to where they were born, anywhere on the canal network. Then, when they returned here to Braunston, they would be baptised again. It was almost as if the first baptism didn't count, and it wasn't that true, and it didn't happen until it was here in Braunston. There's also a common belief that boatmen who passed away while working away from Braunston were often brought back here for burial. However, the church registers show that only a limited number of such cases actually happened. But to me, this still shows that All Saints Church in Braunston would be seen as their spiritual home for many of the boatmen and for the families. There's no doubt that this would have been passed down from father to son, making it their Cathedral of the Canals and a place of great significance for them and their community. Sadly, the current church was built just in time to witness the end of the canal boom with the arrival of the railways, and transportation moved from canal to rail, and the prosperity of the village changed overnight. Ironically, Braunston was served by not one but two railway stations, one on the London and North Western Railway and the other on the Great Central Main Line. But both of these are closed by the 1950s as we witness the growth of the modern motorway system that we know today. As we stepped into All Saints Church, we were welcomed by Reverend Catherine Evans, the rector, and church warden, Mr. Pat Milner. They soon guided us through the church, revealing its rich history, pointing out some of the most remarkable features, each with a story that adds to the charm and the character of All Saints Church.
There have been three churches on this site, and the first one was built in the early 1200s. It didn't last very long because a murder was committed within the church building, and the bishop at the time deconsecrated the building, and it was pulled down and was rebuilt, and that lasted until the mid-1800s, when it was built again to what we see today. There are various points of interest, and people coming into the church for the first time want to make for the chest, which is of great interest. It's thought that it was once a seafaring chest, but then used for keeping church records, with 3 different padlocks to keep it locked, one for the vicar at the time and one each for the 2 church wardens. So it couldn't be opened by one without all 3 being present. Another point of interest is the font situated at the back of the church, which is used for baptizing people of any age, be it a few weeks old up to very adult. And it was designed by William Butterfield, who also designed the pulpit from which sermons were pronounced. We are lucky that we've got 2 fonts in this church. The Norman font, which went missing for a number of years and was found in what was the old vicarage garden and brought back into the church.
In the 2 years I've been here, it's been an absolute joy to learn something of the history and of how important the church has been at particular moments. So obviously very important in terms of families meeting up for key life events from all around the country, all around the canal network. But there have been key moments, like only 100 years ago, just last year in fact, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the boaters' strike. Where they all stopped basically down at the marina here in Braunston. And it was an extraordinary time and a time when Braunston became even more a focal point for interaction, I suppose, between the village and the boaters, or between boat and bank, as I've heard it put. And that was a really rather extraordinary thing. It caused, I think, a lot of sympathy. In the long run, it would have been, I imagine, quite tense for a while, but there was a lot of sympathy for the boaters from the village. A lot of boaters went to the village school, for example, and because they became settled for a little bit more, then obviously Braunston became more of a part of their lives, and some stayed. In fact, it's quite lovely. Often when I do funeral visits and I sort of find out about a person's family, I'll often be told, oh, her mother or her grandfather or granny or someone came off the boats. And often it was around that time, the early 20th century. So it's a very rich history, canal history, as I'm sure you know. But it's a real privilege, really, to be part of that history here as the church. One example was the funeral of a young boy called Edward Walker, who died. He fell off the back of a boat, sadly, and he died in 1923. And it's still really well remembered how caring, how supportive the vicar here at the time was, how incredibly supportive the village and church community was. So that was a very big funeral that happened here in the church, which I think illustrates something of that focal point that Braunston Church plays in the canal network. You know, wherever you're coming from, you see the spire. I've heard people say that it's that sense of coming home, you know, even people who are still continuous cruisers. Of course, these days, there are far fewer people living permanently on the canal network, and rather than it being a place of work, it's more a place of leisure. So we have a lot of people who come through, who will often come to services with us. We had a number of boaters with us just last Sunday, and sometimes you recognise them from year to year. So go, hello, we have met, haven't we? Yes, we were here last year. So, and that's always really lovely. They're part of our church family, even if we see them once a year, you know, they're still part of the family. So that's really nice. It's a really good link with the canals. One of the lovely things is we have 2 Waterways chaplains associated with All Saints Church, Fergus McLaughlin and Helen Walker. And they spend a lot of time sort of walking around and are there just to be a listening ear or a practical support to whatever boaters need. Because it's not just sort of affluent leisure cruisers. There's still a lot of people on the canals who need a bit of extra support, and they always receive a welcome here. And they are always, the Waterways chaplains, as well as the rest of us here, are always very, very willing to support. We had a bit of fun a couple of winters ago when it was very cold and the canal froze. And so my job as vicar became fetching out my husband's big brew buckets and filling them with water and taking them down, because there were boaters that couldn't basically access water because it all frozen up. So you just never know, being the rector at Braunston, what's going to be involved. But we do see people. I mean, people in the village here in Braunston. Obviously, we've got a permanent community. Part of the village do live on or by the water. It's not a separate village. It is Braunston. And the whole community, including the church, are always very welcoming and open to boaters. We love them. I think it keeps us grounded. It's a different lifestyle. It's a different philosophy, different values, different. Braunston's less of a rat race place, but still, when you mix with people, when you have the pleasure and the privilege of mixing with people who have decided that what's important is a simple life in nature, love of community, helping each other out, that's only going to have a good effect on us as well. So yeah, it's a joy to have people come and visit us or drop by or ask us for help, because we're enriched by every person that we meet.
Today, Braunston retains much of its charm whilst embracing the inevitable modern development. But the legacy of the canals is still evident in its community and its local economy, which is testament to the innovation in such a small village. I would say that Braunston Village is a near-perfect example of how our heritage can change in the course of history, blending the old and traditional with the Industrial Revolution.
And please don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more echoes from the countryside. And if you've got any suggestions for future videos, please let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Till next time.